Okay, so have you ever felt like, destined for something? Like you're on a track, maybe even like a little railroaded by it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're diving into today, right? Like this whole fate versus free will thing. But on a cosmic scale, we're talking sources that take this classic, good versus evil battle and make it a high stakes chess match over like millennia.
Right.
And guess what?
What?
Earth is the game board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no pressure.
Yeah, so what's interesting is these sources don't just like present this as some kind of theological debate. They go right into like the mechanics of it all, strategies and players, even the rules of this ultimate showdown.
Yeah, and the players. Let's just say they're not your average chess club, right? I mean, we're talking Lucifer, the original fallen angel, cunning, rebellious against, divine order.
Right.
And he goes up against, God,
the
architect of creation. But here's where it gets really interesting. The sources show them both as like strategic masterminds, thinking a million moves ahead.
Exactly, and it's key to remember, Lucifer's fall wasn't just about like disobeying. It was challenging like the very core of God's authority, questioning the whole balance of power, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a petty little like argument. We're talking a clash of ideologies here. Massive.
So less good versus evil, more like
order and chaos.
Yeah, but like cosmic scale.
Exactly.
Okay, so to make it even more interesting, they each have their champion, right? We've got Christ and the Antichrist. But the sources actually go beyond just, good son versus bad son. It's more nuanced. We have Christ, obviously, carrying all those expectations.
Yeah.
He represents like this preordained good. And then there's the Antichrist, described as being, quote, molded in darkness.
Right.
Okay, hold on. Molded in darkness. What does that even mean? Like in this cosmic chess game we're talking about.
Well, it implies the Antichrist is like purpose-built for this. His existence is shaped by, opposing divine order. Think of the strategies a mind from that kind of environment could create.
That's kind of chilling when you put it like that. So he's not just evil just to be evil. It's more like
it's his origin story.
Yeah, like a whole different upbringing. Makes you wonder how that changes his approach to the game.
Completely changes things because now, maybe from his point of view, he's the hero.
Whoa.
Right.
Okay, so two figures both carrying the weight of destiny. Sounds like they might have more in common than they realize.
Well, what's fascinating is that the sources actually showed this shared sense of unease in both Christ and the Antichrist. It's like, despite being total opposites, they both have this discomfort with their, preordained roles.
Yeah, like they're both kind of stuck, being pushed towards something they didn't really choose.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where this whole free will versus destiny thing gets really interesting, right? Because if these guys, beings of immense power are, struggling with the path laid out for them.
Right.
What does that say about us?
Right, exactly. And we're not just talking about, some abstract theological debate. The sources describe actual real world consequences to this whole like cosmic chess game. Plagues, wars, natural disasters, almost like Earth itself is feeling the strain.
And that's important.
Yeah.
Because it shows that we, like humanity, we're not just bystanders in this whole cosmic game, right? We're participants, even if we don't know it.
So our lives are all like tied up with the moves of these celestial players.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does this unease, this feeling of being trapped, how does it actually like show up in Christ and the Antichrist? What do they do that shows they aren't just going along with it all?
Well, the sources point to these moments, right? Like hesitation, defiance even, in both their journeys. For example, there's this passage where Christ, even though he knows his sacrifice is coming, he still expresses like deep sorrow, questions if this burden is really his. It's subtle, but it's there. He's grappling with this path, even though it's preordained.
Okay, and what about the Antichrist? He's not having second thoughts about, ending the world, right?
It's interesting. The sources describe times when he seems conflicted.
Conflicted?
Yeah, he unleashes chaos and destruction, yeah. But then there are these moments, these instances where he shows, not mercy, sparing those who seem, insignificant to the, the grand scheme of things.
Wow. So even though he's trying to dismantle it all, part of him still sees the value in creation.
Exactly. That internal struggle, the dissonance between his actions and like his nature. She shows he's not just this mindless, agent of chaos. It's more complex than that.
So they're both wrestling with their destinies, but in different ways. But the end game is still happening, right?
Yeah, and that's where the tension really builds. Because while Christ and the Antichrist are, dealing with their roles the world around them, it's moving towards this final confrontation. The stage is set, players are in position, and the first move, what's about to be made.
So it's all on the line, right? The world is like on the edge of its seat, and both Christ and the Antichrist are going into this final showdown with doubt, uncertainty. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around.
It really is a powerful concept when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because it challenges the whole idea of destiny.
Right.
If these figures, who we see as like the embodiment of good and evil, if even they aren't sure about, their own motivations, it makes you wonder, what does that mean for the rest of us?
That's what I keep thinking about. Are we all just pawns in this, cosmic chess match? Or do we have a choice? Can we make our own moves even if there's this like bigger picture that's already been decided?
Yeah, it's a big question. And the sources, well, they don't exactly give a straight answer.
Right.
Which honestly kind of fits, don't you think?
Yeah, I guess so.
But they do hint at something, well, kind of remarkable.
Okay, what's that?
Just the act of questioning, right? Like grappling with this whole free will thing, even in the face of destiny. That gotta mean something.
So you're saying that even just like acknowledging this whole cosmic game, this good versus evil battle happening on such a huge scale, that's a step towards what exactly?
Giving a step toward really knowing ourselves, recognizing the forces at play, understanding the rules. It gives us a certain freedom. What did you say?
Okay, yeah.
We might not be able to like change the players or the board or whatever,
right,
but we can be more aware of our own moves, We can be more intentional.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's like any game, right? And the more you know about the strategies, the more you understand why your opponent does what they do, the better you can play.
Exactly. And in this game, that awareness, that choice, that might be the most powerful move there is.
Wow. So this whole fate versus free will thing, it's not just some like philosophical debate. Yeah. It's happening all around us.
All the time.
And maybe, just maybe, if we think about these ideas, wrestle with the big questions, maybe we can find a little more freedom in our own lives.
Yeah, I like that.
We are diving into this excerpt. And wow, it really does feel like we're stepping right into the middle of some kind of epic fantasy film. I mean, just this imagery of like the world holding its breath, these two figures preparing to clash. It's intense.
Yeah, it grabs you right away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't waste any time getting to the point that the stakes are...
No.
Everything is on the line.
Right. And we're not left guessing who these figures are either. The excerpt comes right out and says it's Christ and the Antichrist. But I have to say what really struck me was the emphasis on strategy. This isn't just some big showdown of brute force. It's like we're watching a chess match unfold, but on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things that makes this excerpt so fascinating. It's not just telling us this is a battle of wits, it's actually showing us that through the characters.
So true. Like with Christ, we get to see inside his head as he's preparing for this confrontation. He's not just, a warrior going into battle. He's thinking deeply about his every move, searching for guidance, trying to understand what's truly at stake here.
And that's where things get really interesting, because you realize he's not even just trying to deceive the Antichrist. It's like he's trying to dismantle this whole web of deception that's been woven by Lucifer.
Which is a pretty daunting task. But here's where I think the excerpt takes a really interesting turn, because even the Antichrist isn't portrayed as just this straightforward bad guy. I mean, yeah, he's been raised for this role, but you can tell he's wrestling with doubts. He's questioning his purpose, the end game, even his own father.
It's like he's starting to suspect he's a pawn in a game he doesn't even fully understand.
Exactly. And the crazy part is Lucifer almost seems to be encouraging that skepticism.
Yeah, it's like it's all part of some twisted plan.
Okay, so we've got Christ grappling with this huge responsibility, trying to untangle this web of deception. And then on the other hand, we've got the Antichrist struggling with doubt, potentially being manipulated by his own father. And that kind of makes you wonder, are they both puppets in a way? I mean, we also get these glimpses into what God and Lucifer are thinking and doing.
And their approaches are completely different, which I think just adds another whole layer to this. On the one hand, you've got Lucifer, who's almost like reveling in his son's doubt. It's like he sees it as a way to manipulate him even further.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it. But then you've got God, who's portrayed as this all-knowing observer. Like he's letting things unfold without stepping in directly.
Right. It's like he understands that true growth, even for someone like Christ, means facing these challenges head on, figuring things out for yourself.
So then we get into this whole question of free will versus destiny. Like, are their choices really their own, or are they just playing out some preordained script?
It's the ultimate paradox, isn't it? And this excerpt really throws that question into sharp relief.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it really makes you think about the nature of power. Like, even these figures who seem so powerful could still be manipulated by someone even bigger. It's almost kind of unsettling.
Definitely. And I think the excerpt really leans into that sense of unease. It's not afraid to make us feel a little uncomfortable.
And that's what I think elevates it beyond just a typical good versus evil story. It's really about these unseen forces at play, and how even in the face of that, you still have these characters trying to define themselves and their choices.
Absolutely.
And it's that struggle that I think makes even a character like the Antichrist so compelling.
Oh, definitely.
Like, he's not just some one-dimensional villain. We see glimpses of his internal conflict. He's searching for answers in his own way.
It's like they're both trapped by their destinies in a way.
Yeah.
But still trying to break free.
Right. And it makes you wonder if there can even be a true winner in this kind of game, or if it's just an endless cycle of manipulation.
Yeah, this excerpt definitely doesn't give us any easy answers.
It's more about raising questions.
And it does that by using some really effective techniques, like that vivid imagery the author uses really heightens the tension.
Oh, for sure. Like, when they describe the world holding its breath, it's like everything's just paused, waiting for this inevitable clash.
But it creates this atmosphere of anticipation and dread.
And speaking of that clash, that ending line is brutal. The pieces were in motion. The first clash was imminent. It's such a cliffhanger.
Oh, it's masterful the way the author just leaves us hanging there.
And it kind of makes me think that's what Lucifer's doing to the Antichrist, too. Like, he's orchestrating this whole thing, manipulating everyone to achieve his own goals.
And, we haven't even touched on the implication that God might be doing the same thing, just with a different approach.
Whoa, yeah. So then how do we even define good versus evil in that context?
It's like the lines become totally blurred.
Because if everyone's being manipulated, can anyone really be considered good or evil?
It really challenges those traditional notions.
It's like good and evil become most irrelevant in the face of this kind of cosmic game.
Right. It completely flips the script on those traditional ideas.
So then where does that leave us, like, as individuals caught in the middle of all this?
Well, it forces us to confront a really unsettling possibility. What if our lives are also like just playing out some preordained story?
Yeah.
And our choices are just illusions?
That's a heavy thought.
Yeah. And it's something that philosophers have been debating for centuries. But this excerpt, even with its fantasy elements, it really taps into that very human fear.
Yeah, totally. Like, what if we don't have as much control as we think we do?
Exactly.
And maybe that's why this excerpt is so powerful, because it doesn't shy away from those big questions.
It embraces them.
And it doesn't try to give us easy answers.
If anything, it just leaves us with even more questions.
But I think there's something to be said for that, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, maybe the act of questioning, of wrestling with those uncertainties.
It's a form of freedom in itself.
I like that.
And I think that's what makes this kind of storytelling so engaging.
Yeah, it's not just entertainment. It makes you think.
It challenges you.
So we're left with this image of these characters caught in this cosmic struggle. But even within that, they're still searching for their own agency.
Still trying to make their own choices.
And in a way, isn't that what we're all doing?
I think so.
Trying to navigate this complex world and figure out where we fit in.
And hoping we're not just puppets on a string.
Right. Well, on that note, I think we'll have to leave it there for now. But wow, what an incredible excerpt. It really gets you thinking about those big cosmic questions and makes you appreciate the power of a good story. All right, so picture this as showdown, but not just any showdown. We're not talking about like armies clashing, right? It's bigger, it's ideas, it's Christ versus the Antichrist.
A battle of pure ideology.
Yeah, and our source material.
Yeah.
It sets the scene and it's palpable. It's a silent earth. The sky is like a mirror to just the turmoil that's going on. Like, on the planet.
Right. Yeah.
And the armies are just frozen because it's this intellectual, spiritual
battle of minds, and the weapons are arguments.
Exactly.
And the battlefield is, like you said, the very essence of truth.
And it's interesting how the Antichrist kicks things off. They go right for like the core of it.
Oh, absolutely.
Free will.
Yeah.
Like, are we really in control?
Right. Are we agents in our own right, or are we just playing out some pre-scripted cosmic drama?
Yeah.
Is there even a point to striving for any kind of salvation if it's all predetermined?
That's heavy. So like right away, the Antichrist is trying to dismantle the idea that our choices even matter.
Oh, 100%. Undermining the very foundation of Christ's message,
Wow. So how does Christ deal with that?
Instead of being pulled into this whole debate of predestination, which is a rabbit hole, believe me.
Yeah.
Christ brings it back to the present. It's like they're saying, even if we're just actors on a stage, doesn't the performance still matter?
Okay, so less about the why of our existence, more about the what now.
Exactly. And that difference is key, right? Because the Antichrist sees salvation as a cage, like gilded, but still a cage.
Wow.
To them, true freedom is rejecting any path, even a path to paradise.
So wait, are they saying oblivion is the goal here, like just to be free?
In their eyes, freedom from God is the ultimate freedom, because God represents order, limits, and for the Antichrist, that's the ultimate no-no.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be a very tempting pitch, right? Do what thou wilt. Sounds pretty good on paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Appealing to that very human desire for autonomy. But Christ argues that freedom without purpose is meaningless. We're just unmoored, adrift.
So it's not just about having free will, but about understanding why we were even given this gift.
Absolutely. Our choices matter, but not just for ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets interesting, because we see the Antichrist waver. Just for a second, you know?
Oh, come on. The Antichrist doubting.
It's a flicker, but it's there. It's like maybe for a moment, Christ's words are resonating on some level.
They can't leave it at that, though, right? I mean, they always have a comeback.
Oh, absolutely. And it's brilliant. They turn to Christ and ask if he has ever questioned God's plan.
Ooh, that's low.
Trying to plant those seeds of
Well,
doubt.
has Dad ever been wrong? Like, come on.
Exactly.
So what happens? How does Christ respond?
He doesn't deny it.
Wow.
He actually embraces the idea of questioning.
Really?
He's saying it's natural to question, that it's part of faith, a necessary part.
Okay, so he's not just blindly following. He's thought about this. He's come to his own conclusions.
It makes his faith stronger, don't you think? Like, he's chosen this, he understands.
Makes it more powerful, for sure. Not just, well, these are the rules.
He owns it.
Right.
And it's like he's saying to the Antichrist, look, I get it. I've been there. But I found something I believe in.
You can feel that tension, right? Like in the air, you know, the weight of this conversation, the stakes.
It's palpable. Every word matters.
Because they're not just like debating, they're shaping how we understand truth, reality itself even.
And you've got Lucifer and God watching this all go down. Imagine that.
Okay, so Lucifer, though, he's got to be loving this, right? Seeing Christ get a little defensive there for a second.
Oh, he's eating it up. Every doubt, every question, it's a win for chaos. That's what he does.
Totally tracks. But God.
Is God freaking out?
God is not fazed. Like, at all.
What? How?
He sees the bigger picture. Something even Lucifer, with all his, you know, whatever, can't quite grasp.
So even the Antichrist, this whole rebellion thing, could it be like part of the plan?
That's the question, isn't it?
It almost like breaks the whole good versus evil thing, doesn't it? Makes it way more complicated. Because maybe there are things we just don't see. Layers of, I don't know, whatever, that we can't even comprehend.
Okay, so we're not just talking philosophy here. We're talking about free will, destiny, the whole shebang.
It really makes you think,
Yeah.
if the Antichrist can question their role, what does that mean for us?
So if the Antichrist can question, like, their whole deal, does that mean, I don't know, that we're not just puppets?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, maybe this whole predestination thing, maybe it's not so cut and dry.
Because they were literally, like, created to rebel if they can have second thoughts.
It's kind of a relief in a way, isn't it?
Right. Like, maybe there's hope for the rest of us who weren't, you know, born to play the bad guy.
Exactly. It means our choices really do matter.
So even though there are these huge forces at work, we still have agency. It's not all just, like, preordained.
And that's huge. Think about what that means for us every day. You know, we're facing our own struggles, doubts, temptations.
We might not be battling God and Lucifer on a cosmic scale, but it's still a battle.
And if the Antichrist can question their path, maybe we should too.
Right, not to become anti-whatever, but to really think about our choices, why we do things, what we believe in.
That internal debate,
Yeah.
that's where the real work happens.
So, like, questioning isn't just okay, it's almost like necessary.
It's how we grow, how we figure out who we are.
Yeah.
We see that in the Antichrist, right? That struggle is what makes them interesting.
It's like they're not just this force of evil, there's more to it.
It adds depth, makes you think.
Makes it real.
And if they can find meaning in that struggle, imagine what we can do.
Okay, so big takeaway for me is this deep dive, it's not about picking sides, Team Christ, Team Antichrist. It's bigger than that.
It's about looking at these ideas, these questions, and seeing how they apply to our own lives.
It's like holding up a mirror to our own belief.
Exactly. Because the real battleground isn't some distant cosmic plane. It's right here, in our own hearts and minds.
And that's a battle worth fighting every single day.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, so we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today, right? Like when you say Christ versus the Antichrist, you know you're getting into some serious ideological warfare.
Absolutely. And with this source material, it's not just a straightforward battle of good versus evil.
Right. It's like they both make such compelling arguments about free will, purpose, this whole question of whether true power comes from order or from just embracing chaos.
It really is like they're two sides of the same coin. You have Christ, unsurprisingly, championing love, a divine plan, this idea that aligning yourself with a greater good is where you find true freedom.
But then the Antichrist comes in swinging, saying any kind of imposed order, even if it's for the greater good, even in the name of good, it ultimately limits individual liberty.
Yeah, and finding where that line blurs is what makes this so interesting.
It's like they're each looking at freedom through completely different lenses, right?
Yeah.
Like for Christ, true freedom comes from understanding and accepting the place God has designed for you.
Whereas the Antichrist sees that as some kind of gilded cage.
Exactly.
Chaos is natural to him. Freedom means you get to make your own rules. Consequences be damned.
And the source material really doesn't shy away from how complicated both those stances are, you know? Like, it'd be pretty great to believe your life has this inherent purpose, a plan laid out by a benevolent creator, but then how much of your free will is actually yours if you're stuck operating inside someone else's design, even if that someone is God?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's where we start to see both Christ and the Antichrist grappling with this really unsettling possibility. What if they're not independent actors at all? What if they're just playing out parts in some grand cosmic play directed by their fathers, by God and Lucifer?
And that's what I find so fascinating. We're talking about beings with almost unimaginable power, yet even they're wrestling with this idea of being pawns in an even bigger game.
Right.
But the thing is, it's the Antichrist, the one who's supposed to embody rebellion, free will. It's him who seems most shaken by this.
It's true.
Almost like even he can't fully break free from this idea of predestined.
Almost like it's woven into the fabric of existence.
And speaking of manipulation, can we talk about Lucifer for a second? Because he seems to be getting a real kick out of this whole clash between his son and Christ.
Oh, absolutely. That's where you start to see these deeper layers of the conflict. He's not just some passive observer.
Yep.
Lucifer is reveling in the chaos, the doubt that this whole thing stirs up. It really makes you wonder.
It does.
Is it genuine free will that Lucifer finds so threatening? Is that what he sees as the real wrench in his own need to control everything?
That's a chilling thought. The very idea of free will is like fundamentally opposed to who Lucifer is. But on the other side of the spectrum, you have God completely silent while Lucifer's over there scheming. What do we make of that? Why the inaction?
It's that contrast that's so crucial here, because God represents a totally different kind of power, not about manipulation. His power is about letting go, allowing events to play out naturally.
So it's like a silent trust.
Right. It might be unsettling, but is it possible that there's a deeper wisdom in that approach? That even conflict, even chaos, can serve some greater purpose we just can't grasp yet.
So we're presented with these two paths. Lucifer's all about control, manipulation, while God's all about trust, letting things unfold organically. But where does that leave us, the ones watching this cosmic chess match go down? How do we even begin to make sense of it all, you know? What does any of it tell us about our own potential for free will when we're talking about forces so far beyond our understanding?
It really is the million-dollar question. And as we'll see, even the Antichrist, raised in the heart of chaos himself, he's not immune to questioning those deeply held beliefs he's carrying around.
So we're really left with this idea that even the Antichrist, someone who seems like they were practically made of chaos and rebellion, even he can't help but question those beliefs he's always held.
It's wild, right? It really makes you think about the nature of free will.
It does.
I mean, here you have the Antichrist, the ultimate symbol of pushing back against any higher power, any sense of a preordained path. But even he has to confront this idea, this possibility that he's playing a part he didn't actually choose.
It's like he's looking in a mirror, but it's this cosmic mirror. And he's not just seeing himself, he's seeing Lucifer, his father, reflected back in his own doubts.
Yes. Exactly. And I think what's even more interesting is how Christ reacts to that, because you'd think he'd exploit that vulnerability.
Right, take advantage of it.
Right. But he doesn't. Instead, it's almost like he's offering a hand, a different way to see this whole conflict.
Like he sees that they're both kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Both trapped in this battle that's being dictated by forces outside their control.
Yes. And instead of feeding into that, perpetuating it, Christ seems to be hinting at something more. a resolution that goes way beyond this good versus evil, order versus chaos thing they have going on.
Okay, so then how does the whole idea of balance fit into all of this? Because they both seem pretty set in their ways.
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Because Christ isn't saying, get rid of chaos. He's talking about integrating it with order.
Whoa.
Right. He seems to be suggesting that real harmony, like true harmony, it doesn't come from wiping out one extreme or the other. It comes from finding that point where they can both exist, where they inform each other, balance each other out.
Which is kind of a radical idea when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because usually Christ is the one who represents order. He's the opposite of everything the Antichrist is supposed to be.
I know.
It's like he's saying, look, chaos is part of creation too. It's got its place, its purpose. We shouldn't try to destroy it. We need to understand it.
Exactly. Figure out where it fits. And this is where I think the Antichrist, for all his talk about freedom and rebellion, he shows his own limitations.
How so?
Well, he's so stuck in his father's teachings, so fixated on power and control as the ultimate expressions of freedom, that he just can't see this other, more nuanced perspective.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it. Like, he's so busy trying to win the game, he's missing the point entirely.
Totally.
But it does make you wonder, though, if the Antichrist, raised by chaos itself, if he can be even a little bit swayed by Christ's message of balance, does that mean there's hope for the rest of us?
Right. Does that mean we can actually break free from how we were raised, from ideologies we've inherited, and actually forge our own paths? That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And this source material, it doesn't exactly give us a straight answer. But I do think it offers a glimmer of hope.
Okay, I like that.
Just the fact that the Antichrist, for even a moment, is open to what Christ is saying, it suggests that even our most deeply held beliefs, they can be challenged. Like, maybe none of us are completely chained to those forces that have shaped us.
Now, that's a powerful thought. And it makes you think about God and Lucifer in all of this too. Because if even their sons can question their roles, can find themselves moved by ideas that challenge their very nature, what does that mean for free will? Even for beings with that much power.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings us to the puppet masters themselves, right? The ones pulling the strings in this whole cosmic drama. So we've spent all this time really digging into this back and forth between Christ and the Antichrist, but it's like, we got to zoom out, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Look at the bigger picture here. You've got God, who created all of this, and he's totally silent. Not a peep. And then there's Lucifer, just watching it all go down with this sly grin on his face, loving every minute of the chaos he's helped create. Makes you wonder about power, doesn't it? What it really means.
Oh, absolutely. And the way they each approach this whole drama playing out, it's fascinating. You've got Lucifer, who's basically Mr. Calculated Manipulation.
Right.
To him, power equals control, pulling the strings, making things happen exactly the way he wants.
It's like he sees the whole universe as some kind of chessboard and he's playing both sides.
Precisely. But then you have God, and he's doing the exact opposite. No interfering, no dictating, just silence. It's like he trusts that whatever he created already has the order built in. And that brings up such a huge question. Is it possible that God doing nothing is actually a bigger display of power than everything Lucifer's doing? Could there be some kind of, divine wisdom in letting go, in trusting that even conflict and chaos have a purpose?
And if that's true, then what does it even mean for the Antichrist to rebel? If God isn't threatened by chaos, if he's not up there freaking out trying to force everything to go his way, then what's the Antichrist actually fighting against?
Man, that is the question, isn't it? It's like the whole foundation of the Antichrist's identity is built on opposing God, fighting against this supposed cosmic order. But maybe that order isn't as rigid or controlling as he's always believed.
Right.
You could almost say that by embracing chaos and rebellion, the Antichrist is playing a part in something way bigger. And it's not Lucifer's plan either. It's the very force he's trying to defy.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you really think about it. Yeah. That even when we try to fight destiny, break free from the roles we're given, we might still be part of this massive design, something we can't even comprehend.
Right. It's enough to make your head spin.
So is that where true free will lies then? In making choices within the roles we have? Or is it more about recognizing those roles and then choosing how we play them? Maybe even changing them up completely, creating something totally new.
Man, that's the question, isn't it? I think if this source material teaches us anything, it's that life, it's rarely straightforward. It's up to us to figure these things out, to find meaning and purpose within all of this.
We started this whole deep dive with a pretty intense face-off. Christ versus the Antichrist, order versus chaos. But look at where we ended up.
I know, right?
This crazy complex universe, way more nuanced than we probably imagined. A universe where free will and fate are constantly bumping up against each other.
That's a lot to process.
It really is. But hey, if we learned anything today, it's that asking these big questions, even if we don't come up with any solid answers, that's part of being human. So as we wrap things up here, I want to encourage everyone listening to just sit with the not knowing, What does free will really mean to you? Do you think there's a plan, some kind of predetermined order to it all? Or is chaos where it's at? No easy answers here, but it's the act of searching, of grappling with these ideas. That's where it all starts to make sense.
Think you know the story of Christ and the Antichrist. Get ready to see it in a whole new light. Because this deep dive, we're diving into a story where good and evil, well, let's just say it gets a cosmic plot twist.
What I find fascinating is how this story takes on free will and determinism.
Oh, the big questions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it presents these huge philosophical concepts through these iconic figures, Christ, the Antichrist. Makes it all really tangible.
Okay, so we've got Christ, we've got the Antichrist, classic showdown, right? But something's different here.
This time they're both starting to question everything. Like they're realizing they might just be puppets.
Someone else is pulling the strings.
Exactly. And that's where the real tension comes in. It's not just the external battle. It's this internal struggle they're both grappling with.
Makes you wonder if even figures as powerful as these guys, are they really in control?
Right. It's unsettling, even for us as readers to consider that.
Totally. And speaking of unsettling, enter Lucifer.
No!
But he's not just the villain here, he's like the puppet master,
Yes.
right?
And this is where we start to understand Lucifer's ideology, how he sees the universe. He views it as this grand chessboard.
And everyone else is just pawns, he can move around.
Exactly. Beings like Christ and the Antichrist, they're just pieces in his game.
So he's orchestrating this whole showdown just to prove he can.
Not even just to win, it goes deeper than that. He's after control. He's trying to prove to God that control is the ultimate power.
Which, I mean, if you think about it, it raises some really big questions like, how much agency do any of us really have if someone like Lucifer is calling the shots?
It's a question philosophers have been wrestling with for centuries, right? Are we truly making our own choices, or are we just playing out a script someone else wrote? This story takes that question head on.
And just when you think it can't get any weirder, God steps in. But not with, like, thunderbolts and pronouncements.
No, instead, God drops a truth bomb. Lucifer's wrong. There's a power beyond control, even beyond the devil's reach.
Okay, now you've got to tell me, what is this power? Don't leave me hanging.
Love. God basically tells Lucifer, you're so focused on control, you've missed the bigger picture.
So are we talking about love as in, like, the warm fuzzies, or?
It's more than just a feeling here. It's presented as this fundamental force in the universe, the very fabric of creation. Even chaos serves it.
So we're talking about love as this force of nature, something even Lucifer, with all his scheming, can't control. Kind of blows your mind a little, doesn't it?
It really makes you rethink the whole idea of power, And it's not just some abstract concept either. Like, it really impacts the characters, especially the Antichrist.
Oh, yeah. Right. We left off with him having a bit of a hold on a minute moment. So how does this whole love thing land on the guy who's basically designed to oppose it?
Just imagine being raised to believe that opposition is your purpose, that going against everything good is in your DNA.
Heavy stuff.
Right. And then, boom, you're hit with this idea that love is the most powerful force out there. Talk about an identity crisis.
No kidding. Throws his whole world upside down.
And that's what's so brilliant about it. The writer flips the script. We expect the Antichrist to be immune to this kind of thing, but he's the one who has this big awakening.
Makes you wonder if good and evil are as black and white as we tend to think, huh?
Exactly. And that's what makes this story so compelling. It takes these massive ideas about free will, determinism, good, evil, and makes them personal.
So it's less about ideologies battling it out and more about how these characters actually deal with these ideas on a personal level.
You got it. And by doing that,
Yeah.
it kind of forces us to do the same. How do we define power? Is it about control or something more?
Because let's face it, we've all been there, right? Trying to force things to go our way, clinging to control.
Absolutely.
But what if, like Lucifer, we're missing the bigger picture?
That's the question the story really makes us ask ourselves. What if letting go of that control actually opens us up to something bigger, something more meaningful, something more powerful even?
And it's not like we're given all the answers, right? It's more about making us think, making us question.
Precisely. It's not preachy, doesn't offer easy answers. It just throws this powerful idea out there. Love is this fundamental force and lets us sit with it.
So no pressure, right? Just figure out love in the universe. Easy peasy.
But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. It's not something you just figure out in your head. You feel it, you know?
Okay, so how does that play out in the story? What happens when this idea of love, this uncontrollable force, starts to affect everything?
Now that's where things get really interesting. We start to see the characters, even Lucifer, questioning everything they thought they knew. And those moments of doubt, those cracks in the facade, that's where the potential for real change starts to show up.
It's wild how the story tucks love and control, these things that seem like total opposites, and shows how connected they really are.
It's true, right? Like Lucifer's so fixated on controlling everything, he completely misses the point of love.
He's like trying to hold water in his hands. The harder he squeezes, the more he loses.
Exactly. And it's something we all struggle with, trying to control our lives, relationships, even our own emotions sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. But this story, it kind of reminds you that real strength, real power, maybe it comes from letting go a little.
Yeah, embracing the unknown. Because you can't force love, but you can,
create the space for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's about trust, empathy, making yourself vulnerable, choosing to act with love, even when it's hard, even when it feels risky.
And let's be real, that's most of the time, right? Life throws curveballs. It'd be easier to just clam up, try to control every little thing.
Sure, but maybe that's when choosing love matters most.
When it's the hardest, it's probably the most important.
Because at the end of the day, love is that connection, that thing that gives our lives meaning. It's what makes us human.
For a story about Christ and the Antichrist, good versus evil, this deep dive, it really took us to some unexpected places.
That's the power of a good story, right? It can start with something familiar and then boom, it's making you question everything you thought you knew.
Free will, the nature of power, what it means to be alive even, it really makes you think. And that's what makes this story stick with you, I think.
It's not just a story, it's a conversation. A journey you go on as you read.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with? What's the big takeaway from all this talk of love and control and the universe?
Remember that even when everything feels chaotic, even when it feels like you're not in control, you always have a choice. You can choose fear or you can choose love.
And maybe, just maybe, choosing love, that's the most revolutionary act there is.
Now there's something to think about.
Right. Food for thought. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the cosmic implications of love.
We're talking about, it's a cosmic chess match.
Philosophical warfare.
Yeah. Oh, and the Antichrist is involved.
Of course the Antichrist. Why not?
So we are jumping into this deep dive right into the aftermath of this huge battle.
Yeah.
And Lucifer is, he's feeling good, he's gloating, he thinks he won.
He's reveling in victory, and he really wants to emphasize that he planned everything. Like, he is so proud of himself.
Yeah, and he used everybody.
Everyone. Even his son.
Even his son, the Antichrist. Just pawns.
Best pawns in his little game.
So what does that tell us right off the bat? This is not a good dude, but he's not stupid.
No, and that's what makes him so interesting, right? It's not just brute force with Lucifer. He's got this incredible intellect, and he's not afraid to use it.
So walk us through some of the details of his little plan here. I mean, the scale of this thing, right?
The scale is mind-blowing. We're talking eons. This isn't some quick game of checkers. This is cosmic chess on a level we can barely grasp. And the details Lucifer reveals, they're chilling. He's talking about predicting every move, weaving doubt and opposition into his plan like it's all part of some grand tapestry.
He even says that, doubt was part of his plan. So, if you doubted him, congratulations, you just played right into his hand.
Exactly. He wants everyone to know that he's in control, that he's always 10 steps ahead.
But is he?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Because this level of control, this need to prove his intellect is superior, it kind of makes you wonder, is he really as in control as he thinks he is?
Yeah. I mean, this is where it gets really interesting to me. We have to talk about the Antichrist.
Let's talk about the Antichrist.
Because you would think, your dad uses you as a pawn, even if your dad is Lucifer.
Right. Even if you are the Antichrist.
You'd be a little ticked off.
At least a little.
But instead of rage, he's just huh.
Yeah. There's this unsettling sense of understanding from the Antichrist. He's processing the situation like it's a complex equation. No emotion, just cold, hard logic.
So what does that tell us about the Antichrist?
It tells us he's a chip off the old block.
Yeah.
He's his father's son. He sees the universe through the lens of strategy, and in a twisted way, Lucifer's manipulation validates that worldview for him.
So it's like instead of being mad that he was used,
Yeah.
he's almost impressed by it. Like, wow, Dad, you really got me good.
Exactly. And that's what's so chilling. He's not driven by the usual human responses. Anger, resentment, a desire for revenge. He's operating on a whole other level, and it's a level that aligns perfectly with Lucifer's own twisted logic.
So Lucifer's win, his so-called triumph of intellect, it actually reinforces the very mindset that makes the Antichrist so dangerous.
100%. And it sets the stage for a confrontation that goes far beyond a simple battle of good versus evil.
Because now we've got Christ stepping into this whole mess. And it's interesting because Lucifer is, like we said, he's thrilled with himself.
Yeah, he's preening, he's basking in the supposed glory of his victory.
And Christ shows up and he's not rattled.
No, not at all. He's calm, composed, like he sees right through Lucifer's charade.
Which must drive Lucifer crazy.
Oh, I'm sure it does. Imagine putting all that effort into your grand plan only to have someone completely see through it. It's got to sting.
And then Christ does something really interesting. He acknowledges that Lucifer is clever. He's smart. He gives him that.
It's like a backhanded compliment, right? Like, oh, you think you're so smart.
And then drops the bomb.
And what a bomb it is. He basically says, this was never just your game, Lucifer. I let you do all this.
So basically all this, bragging, all this like, I outsmarted God.
It all comes crashing down.
It all falls apart.
Because suddenly it's like winning a rigged game.
Yeah, it's like, what was the point of all that? Like, if you're going to cheat, it doesn't really matter if you win.
And that's the thing about Lucifer. He's so focused on control, on proving he's intellectually superior, that he misses the bigger picture entirely.
So what is the point then? Like, if God let this whole thing happen, what is the goal?
I think the goal is revelation.
Okay.
God allowed Lucifer to execute this grand plan to expose a deeper truth.
Which is?
Balance. Lucifer thinks he just proved that control equals power.
Right.
But Christ is showing that the universe doesn't work like that. It's not about one side dominating completely.
So it's not just like good versus evil and one wins and one loses.
It's about the interplay. Control and freedom, chaos and order, they have to coexist.
So like, how does that play out though?
Yeah.
Like, give me a real world example. What does that actually look like?
Think about like a parent letting their kid like totally trash their room.
Okay.
Not because they like the mess, but because they know the kid will learn something by having to clean it up.
Okay.
It's about the bigger lesson.
So you're saying this whole cosmic chess match, it's not just some abstract theological debate. It actually like matters to us.
Totally. This struggle between control and freedom, it's everywhere. History, politics.
Our own lives.
Exactly. We all want structure, but we also want to make our own choices. We try to plan, but then things happen and we have to adapt.
Yeah. It's like, am I really in control of my life or am I just kidding myself?
And that question, that's what makes this whole thing so relevant, right?
Especially when even Lucifer, this master strategist, turns out to be a pawn in a bigger game.
Right. And that brings us back to the Antichrist.
Okay.
Because he seems to get this in a way that Lucifer doesn't.
So you're saying the Antichrist might actually understand the universe better than Lucifer?
It's possible. Remember how he reacted to being used? That eerie understanding?
Yeah, like it was all part of the plan.
Exactly. It's like he sees himself as part of some grand cosmic experiment.
And he's cool with that.
He seems to be, which is a terrifying thought.
Yeah, it's like if the Antichrist gets it, but Lucifer doesn't, where does that leave everyone else?
That's the question, isn't it? Are we all just stuck being pawns in their games, or do we have a say in how things play out?
Or is free will just an illusion?
That's what God's intervention really throws into question.
So God steps in.
And he doesn't condemn Lucifer, which I think surprises him.
Yeah, because Lucifer's expecting like, the big, I told you so.
Right, exactly. But that's not God's style, is it?
No. Instead, he's just like, okay, Lucifer, your turn's over.
Time out. For 1,000 years.
1,000 years? I mean, what does that even mean,
It's interesting, isn't it? 1,000 years, it's almost like symbolic somehow. But it's a long time to think about what you've done.
Especially because, in a way, God's saying that by winning, Lucifer actually proved the need for balance. Right?
Exactly. The very thing he rejects. He needed to be taken out of the equation temporarily to demonstrate that need.
Which kind of makes you think about, like, our everyday struggles with this.
Oh, absolutely. We try to control everything, plan every detail.
And sometimes we need those moments where it all falls apart, to realize that maybe we're not supposed to have all the answers.
Or that letting go a little can actually lead to a better outcome. That's a tough lesson, but it seems like even Lucifer needed a cosmic timeout to learn it.
So what happens next? Where does this leave us?
I think it leaves us with more questions than answers, to be honest. Like,
Right.
what happens in 1,000 years?
Right. Does Lucifer come back?
And if he does, has he learned anything? Or is he just going to pick up where he left off?
And what about us? What are we supposed to do in the meantime?
I think that's where the Antichrist comes in, strangely enough. He seems weirdly okay with this whole situation.
Like he understands something we don't.
Right. Like he's seeing the board from a completely different angle. And maybe, just maybe, if we can figure out what he sees, it'll help us navigate the next 1,000 years.
Well, that is a thought.
You know, the stories we cover on these deep dives, they always bring up these big questions. But this one's got me thinking about the cost of victory, you know? We're diving into these excerpts you guys sent, and it's like witnessing the aftermath of a cosmic brawl.
Yeah, and what's really got me is we're not just talking about like physical battles here, but this clash of wills, these philosophies, and it's really gotten under the skin of the supposed victor, even Lucifer himself.
It's wild, right? Lucifer, pulling the strings, orchestrates this whole elaborate scheme, scores this win, and then bam, he's hit with this wave of doubt.
And to make it even juicier, the doubt comes from his son, the Antichrist. Imagine that, questioning the guy who basically wrote the book on power.
Seriously? Okay, so we've got these two forces, right? Lucifer, all about control, intellect, manipulation, versus, well, something else entirely that even his son is wrestling with.
Totally. See, Lucifer, he's playing cosmic chess, every move calculated, victory the only goal. Harmony, balance, those are delusions to him, weaknesses to be exploited.
But hold on, so this whole control thing, is that what's tripping him up now? Like, did his own grand plan backfire?
It's possible, even likely. This reminds me of that whole hubris thing, you know, like in those Greek myths. Too much pride, ambition leading to a downfall, like Icarus flying too close to the sun. Lucifer's so obsessed with control, he can't see what's right in front of him.
That is a heavy thought, that even someone like Lucifer can fall prey to such a human flaw. And it makes you think, what does this mean with God stepping in, making these pronouncements?
This is where their whole approach to power diverges. Lucifer, he's all about domination, guy. It's about creation, harmony, you know. It's like that age-old debate. Should power control or should it empower?
We see this everywhere, right? From like ancient philosophy to politics today. It's wild how even on a cosmic scale, it comes down to control versus balance.
Absolutely. And now, throw the Antichrist transformation into the mix. Talk about a plot twist. He goes from devoted follower to, what, doubting his dad's whole deal?
Yeah.
What's that about? A real crisis, a strategic move, or is free will actually a thing?
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's a huge G question. But before we unpack that, let's talk about what this does to Lucifer. This isn't just some intellectual debate for him. It's personal, shaking him to his core.
Totally. Imagine building your whole life, your whole belief system on something you thought was rock solid, and then it crumbles. That's what Lucifer's facing. Makes you wonder, could our own beliefs be that flawed?
This whole thing, it really makes you think about what believing in something truly means, you know.
It cuts deep, right? We're talking about Lucifer, a being who's placed so much faith in his own intellect, and then, boom, he accomplishes this massive feat. But it leaves him with this gnawing feeling that maybe, just maybe, he's built his whole castle on shaky ground.
And it's not just any old doubt, is it? This is coming from his son, the Antichrist. Someone he created who's supposed to be the embodiment of his will, and even he's questioning things.
That's got to sting. You know, we talk about human psychology, and one thing we know is that having those core beliefs challenged, especially after achieving some big goal, it can really mess you up. You know, it's like suddenly you're free-falling, questioning everything you thought you knew.
So do we think Lucifer will embrace this whole balance thing he's been rejecting? Or will this internal struggle make him even more dangerous, more unpredictable?
It's a tough one to call. I mean, part of me thinks this could push him over the edge. Like, if he's losing faith in his own methods, he might just double down, become even more destructive, right? But there's also that chance, that slim chance, that this is it, the wake-up call he needed. That maybe he'll finally see the limitations of trying to control everything and everyone.
And we can't forget about God in all of this. It's interesting how God doesn't just smite Lucifer on the spot or even try to change his mind directly.
Right. God's playing a different game here, a much longer, more subtle game. It's like there's a deeper understanding of Lucifer's nature and awareness of the bigger picture that we're just starting to grasp.
So what about that 1,000-year sentence? Is that purely a punishment or is there more to it?
You know, a lot of theological traditions, they view punishment as not just about retribution, but also about rehabilitation, about giving someone a chance to change. Maybe that's what this is, a cosmic timeout for Lucifer to sit with everything that's happened, to really wrestle with the choices he's made.
Like a forced retreat to rethink his whole strategy.
Exactly. Time to reflect, away from all the chaos and temptation.
But is it really about redemption, or is this just another move in some grand cosmic chess match? One that even Lucifer, for all his intellect, can't quite grasp?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? This whole scenario, it's like peeking behind the curtain of this epic drama where good versus evil, victory versus defeat, well, it's all a lot more complex than we ever imagined.
And it makes you wonder, if even someone like Lucifer can be caught off guard, what does that say about how we see the world, how we make our own choices? It's almost like we're looking in a mirror, right? Except it's a cosmic mirror reflecting back these fundamental truths about power, about winning, about the things we think we want versus what might actually fulfill us.
100%. And it brings us right back to where we started, this deep dive. It's not just about Lucifer. It's about us. Because if he can stumble, if his intellect can lead him astray, what does that mean for us mere mortals?
Right. Like, we're not exactly fighting cosmic beings here, but we all deal with that pull, that desire for control. And how often does it actually work out the way we think it will?
Exactly. We cling to our plans, our ideas about how things should be, and then, well, life happens. We pour so much energy into controlling the uncontrollable, and it can warp our relationships, even ourselves.
Makes me think of that saying, man plans, God laughs. It's like, maybe it's not about a cosmic joke, but a little nudge to remind us to let go a bit.
Maybe that's the whole point. True strength isn't about forcing things. It's about riding the waves, learning to adapt. And that's true for us, just like it is for Lucifer.
It's a lot to process, right? To think that maybe this whole 1,000 years, it's not about punishment, but an invitation, a chance for Lucifer to look inward, to realize that real power isn't about bending the universe to his will, but finding peace within himself, with everything around him.
Wow, yeah. Can you imagine? This being of immense power, forced to confront the emptiness of his own ambition. It's like this powerful reminder that sometimes the toughest battles, they're fought not on a battlefield, but inside ourselves.
So here's something to think about. Where are you holding on too tight in your own life? What would happen if you let go a little, embraced the unknown, allowed yourself to be surprised?
Because maybe, just maybe, that's where real freedom is. Real balance, real power. And we're going to uncover some seriously big philosophical questions along the way.
Definitely not your average good versus evil story, no.
Not at all. This goes way deeper than that.
Yeah.
We're talking about a power struggle that could shatter like the entire universe.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about this one is that it forces us to confront some really, really uncomfortable truths about power.
Right.
Like free will and, what happens when you question authority. What's the price you pay for that?
Yeah, it gets intense. So, okay, let's set the stage a little bit. We've got Lucifer, right? Fresh off his little rebellion against, well, God. He's basically staring down some pretty heavy consequences for his actions. But here's the thing. He's not, some mindless monster just wreaking havoc.
Yeah.
This is a being of serious intellect.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like off the charts intelligence, used to getting what he wanted.
Used to having that power, yeah.
Exactly. But now suddenly he's confronted with the very real possibility that he's not quite as in control as he thought he was.
Yeah, and I think that's where things get really interesting because, you can practically see the wheels turning in his head. Like he knows he's lost this particular battle.
I know.
But he's got this pride,
So much pride.
This fierce, fierce intellect, and it refuses to let him just go down without a fight. He's clinging to this idea that even in defeat, he's exposed something.
Exposed what?
Like a crack in the system, This flaw in the universe's so-called perfect order.
So even as he's about to face the music,
Yeah.
he's still trying to claim some kind of moral victory. Talk about adding insult to injury, right?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's not just about saving face. I think he genuinely believes that he's proven a point. Even the divine can be questioned.
Okay.
That blind obedience isn't actually true order. It's just, blindness. And this is where it gets really juicy because we've got another player in this whole cosmic drama, the Antichrist.
Okay.
Now, he's not just some sidekick in this story.
Yeah.
This guy, he's got his own sharp mind, like father, like son, right?
Oh, right.
He's watching this clash of the titans firsthand, and you can practically see those wheels turning in his head, too. It's like he's grappling with the implications. If someone as powerful as Lucifer can fall, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my ambitions? What does it even mean for my understanding of how this whole universe works?
So we've got this incredibly tense standoff brewing, right? On one side, Lucifer, this champion of intellect, ambition, clinging to this belief that power equals control. But then there's Christ, representing this completely different perspective. So what's his take on all of this? Like, what are the core beliefs that are clashing here? So no cosmic laser beams or anything, but you're telling me this is still a showdown for the ages.
Oh, absolutely. It's a battle of ideologies.
Yeah.
Imagine it, a celestial courtroom where the fate of everything hangs in the balance.
Okay, I'm listening.
Lucifer, ever the defiant one, he stands there and argues that his rebellion, it wasn't just some, like, childish tantrum.
Right.
He truly believes that he exposed something crucial, this fundamental flaw in the universe. The idea that even God's order, it can be questioned.
So he's kind of pulling a Socrates, but on like a cosmic scale.
Yeah.
Saying that questioning authority is actually like a good thing.
Exactly. This unwavering belief in the power of the questioning mind. Like blind faith without critical thought. That's not true belief. It's just, blindness.
You see what you're saying?
But Christ, he comes back with this totally different kind of power, right? Not force, not domination, but this understanding.
Yeah.
You're talking about balance, this power that comes from upholding the balance. He argues that Lucifer's obsession with control, it's self-defeating. True strength, it comes from working within the natural order.
So it's more go with the flow than like impose your will kind of thing.
It really is. It's about understanding, accepting, and working within a larger order.
That's a pretty humbling thought.
It is humbling. And think about it, this clash between control and acceptance. It's not just some abstract debate.
Yeah.
This plays out in our lives every day.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just think about how often we try to control every little detail.
Exactly.
Like if we just micromanage everything, we'll somehow achieve happiness.
And it just ends up stressing us out. Or think about it on a larger scale. Societies, entire civilizations, they've crumbled because they tried to control everything instead of adapting.
Wow.
This story, it's a mirror.
Okay.
It reflects our own struggles back at us, even though it's set on this grand cosmic stage.
So this divine standoff, it's really got me thinking, but how does it actually end? What happens to Lucifer after this whole confrontation?
So this is where it gets really interesting. The story describes his imprisonment not as torture, but as this restoration.
Okay.
A necessary restoration of balance, like hitting the reset button.
So it's not like good versus evil and good wins, bad loses, end of story.
Not quite.
More nuanced than that.
It's about maintaining equilibrium.
Equilibrium.
And this is where things get really tricky.
Okay.
It suggests that evil, or at least the potential for it, it's not just some external force.
Right.
It's inherent to the universe itself, something that needs to be, managed, understood, not just eradicated.
So it's like the universe needs a bit of chaos to maintain balance.
Like that Einstein quote, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. You can't have order without chaos. You can't have light without darkness.
Whoa, that's deep. Definitely going on my list of refrigerator magnet quotes. But back to Lucifer, I mean, he's out of commission now, but is his story really over?
Well, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the story, it leaves us with these chilling words from Lucifer himself as he's being sealed away. He says, "This is not the end."
Oh, man. I am getting chills. So even though evil has been, contained, there's this lingering sense of unease. This isn't over, is it? What happens next? What about the Antichrist? Where does he fit into all of this? So last we left off, Lucifer's, he's been sealed away.
Yeah.
But not before dropping that super creepy, "this not the end" line.
Right. Talk about ominous last words.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So what happens to the Antichrist? How does he deal with all of this, cosmic chaos?
That's actually one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story, the way it kind of shifts focus to the Antichrist.
Oh.
Because here he is, right? He's gone from being firmly in his father's corner, totally buying into that whole power and control above all else thing, and then boom, he witnesses his father's downfall.
And now he's like, wait a minute.
Exactly. And then he chooses to align himself with Christ, but you can tell he's wrestling with some stuff, like some serious internal conflict. It's like a part of him still can't quite let go of those ideas his father planted.
So he's picked a side, but he's not sure if he fully believes it yet.
Right. And isn't that such a human experience?
Totally.
To be caught between these two opposing forces, trying to figure out what you believe when the answers aren't so simple.
It's like you have that aha moment where you realize what you always believed in might not be the whole truth.
Yes. And then you're stuck with that. Okay, what now?
Exactly. So what now? What happens next for the Antichrist? What happens next for the universe?
That's the beauty of this story. It doesn't hand us easy answers. It leaves us with these possibilities. It makes us think. Lucifer's gone, but his questions linger. The Antichrist has chosen a path, but his struggle, It's not over. Not by a long shot.
So the universe is at peace, but like under this crazy amount of tension. It's the quiet after a storm, but you can still feel the electricity in the air, you know?
100%.
What's the big takeaway here? What do we learn from this whole deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is, even in a story about good versus evil, it's never really that simple. Like, there's always more to it.
Right.
And Lucifer, for all his flaws, he dared to question. He reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous questions, those ones that challenge us the most, those are the questions that can lead to real growth.
So even though, like, good triumphed, the universe still needs those dissenting voices.
It's like true harmony. It's not about silencing dissent. It's about understanding its role, its purpose in the grand scheme of things.
Wow. That's a lot to think about.
It is, but I think it's a conversation worth having, because ultimately this story, it's not just about angels and demons and, epic battles.
Right.
It's about us. It's about the choices we make every day, the things we believe in, the questions we dare to ask.
Wow. Well, I'm going to be thinking about this for a while.
The motivations and regrets of some seriously powerful figures.
They're not just powerful in the, worldly sense. We're talking Lucifer, the Antichrist, Christ, even God.
Yeah.
Beings who shape existence itself.
Yeah, no pressure, right. But seriously, their potential regrets could rock the universe as we know it.
We'll get into that. The idea that even God might look back, and we'll get there. Let's start with the ultimate rebel, though, Lucifer. Always painted as evil incarnate, but is it that simple?
Yeah, is it all just about wanting power?
See, that's where it gets interesting. Imagine looking at the universe, all its chaos and chance, and thinking, this is fundamentally broken. That's Lucifer. He genuinely thought he could build a better system.
So not a tantrum, he was convinced he was right.
Exactly. Order, logic, reason, those were his things, not this whole free will experiment, his rebellion. It was about imposing that vision.
Control freak on a cosmic scale, but did he ever, doubt that, have regrets?
And that's the thing, most sources say no, he's steadfast. But there's a hint, a crack in the arrogance, a whisper of maybe, just maybe.
Ooh, okay, now that's interesting. And speaking of complex figures, there's Lucifer's heir apparent, right? The Antichrist.
This is where it gets wild. Inherits that strategic mind, the need for control, but also he's got this front row seat to both sides.
Not your average following in Dad's footsteps situation.
Right. He gets the appeal of Lucifer's order, who wouldn't want to control chaos.
Yeah.
But Christ's philosophy, that's got a pull on him too.
So what is it about Christ that calls to him? What's the alternative here?
Balance. Christ represents a universe where free will matters, even with a divine plan. Not just about power, but agency, choosing your path.
Heavy stuff. Like, most of us just argue about what to eat, not the fate of existence. But this Antichrist dilemma, that's relatable,
Exactly. And maybe his biggest regret is not realizing that sooner, being a pawn in the game instead of, well, himself.
Makes you think, are we all kind of stuck between those roles sometimes? But shifting gears a bit, let's talk Christ himself. The good guy, sure. But what does that even mean on this scale?
Crucial question. Because Christ's power, it's not about domination. It's understanding, compassion. He sees the bigger picture, why Lucifer did what he did.
So not about overpowering, but showing him a better way.
Exactly. Christ wants Lucifer to get it, to see the value in balance, in free will, alongside divine order.
And that takes, some next level empathy, given what's at stake. Speaking of things hard to wrap our heads around, it's God time.
Right. Like, how do you even begin to discuss it?
Exactly. I'm a little terrified, if I'm honest. Where do we even begin?
What if, instead of fear, we approach it with, curiosity?
Curiosity, as in, God's this big mystery we're going to poke at with a stick.
Sort of. The question always comes up. If God knew Lucifer would rebel, why create him at all? Why risk it?
Okay, yeah, that's the big one. Why?
Because God's not controlling puppets. More like a gardener. Plants the seeds, tends, but knows true growth needs freedom, even when it's messy.
So even knowing the pain, the rebellion, free will was worth it.
Because in that freedom, that's where love is, beauty, things impossible with just control, and it leads to God's regret.
Hold on, regret. From a being outside of time, how does that even...
Not regret like we feel it, more cosmic sadness maybe. Okay. Understanding that free will, while essential, equals suffering sometimes.
So he gets it, the pain, the joy, all of it, even if he's experiencing it differently.
It's a lot, right? But what it tells us is even on a cosmic scale, choices matter. And even existing outside of time, maybe there's a kind of empathy there.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
And we're just getting started.
It's easy to get lost in the whole cosmic scale of this, but these aren't just abstract ideas, are they? God experiencing something like regret, it makes you think about choices, even our little ones.
Right. Like if even God feels that weight, what does it mean for us?
It's like these figures, for all their power, they still deal with the same stuff we do, don't they? Logic versus emotion, trying to understand it all.
That's what's so fascinating. We put them on pedestals, but they're reflections of ourselves, just, magnified to a universal scale.
Making mistakes, doubting, trying to make sense of the chaos makes you feel less alone, right?
Absolutely. But how do we actually apply this? We're not running universes, thankfully. So for the average listener,
Yeah, what's the takeaway here?
think about Lucifer's order obsession, that feeling of things would be better if everyone just listened to me. Don't you ever feel that?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I just want to make all the decisions, plan everything perfectly. But then I thrive on spontaneity too, so.
And that's the Antichrist struggle right there. The pull between the safe, known path versus, well, what if I choose my way?
Picking between a boring map and a compass that could lead you anywhere.
Exactly. We do that every day, though. Do I stick with the comfortable, or what if I leap into the unknown?
Scary, but kind of freeing at the same time, isn't it? But then you've got Christ offering a middle ground.
Balance, right? He accepts the wildness of free will, but also says there's a bigger order. It's not controlling, it's about understanding.
Surrendering to the unknown, but not blindly. Having faith that even if we can't see it all, it's working out somehow.
You got it. That's the profound part. Peace not from control, but trust in something bigger than us, even if we don't get it.
So we're all dancing between these forces then. Need for order, wanting to be free, trying to find where those meet. How do we make sense of it?
Maybe that's the wrong question entirely. Maybe it's not about sense, but just taking it in, the complexity, how amazing it is that it exists at all.
So not answers, but asking better questions, ones that lead to more questions, and somehow we understand ourselves better.
You're getting it. The cosmic figures, they're not giving us a how-to guide. They're saying, hey, this search for meaning, it never ends.
Like we're all detectives, right? Finding clues, following leads, and maybe, if we're lucky, getting glimpses of the truth.
And speaking of truth, we've only scratched the surface of how these figures affect everything.
Wait, there's more.
We've done their motives, their regrets, but what about the ripple effects? Their choices shaped everything, and that's a whole other...
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. These figures, these forces, they're still shaping things. Like their choices echo through time.
Right, it's like you drop a pebble in a pond, those ripples keep going, changing everything they touch. Lucifer, for example. His rebellion, that need for control, it wasn't just a tantrum, it created a whole way of thinking.
Like he was the original rebel, the one who dared to question, even if it meant turning everything upside down.
You got it. And that's still with us, isn't it? That push and pull, structure versus freedom, doing things the old way or finding something new. We all feel that.
We talked about Lucifer maybe having a little regret, that doubt. Do you think that's part of his legacy too? That even when you're convinced, there's still that question?
Ooh, now that's interesting. It's like he was so set on order, but in rebelling, he made questioning the status quo a thing,
So he accidentally made free will stronger by fighting against it.
It's a paradox.
Yeah.
And that leads us to Christ, right? He's the opposite. Not about forcing order, but a different way of being.
Compassion, understanding. He was all about that balance, how free will and a divine plan, they can coexist.
Exactly. Like he gave the universe a different option, not about power over others, but connection with them.
You see that everywhere today, don't you? People fighting for what's right, helping each other. That's got to be part of his impact.
Absolutely. And it goes beyond religion even, right? That idea that we should be kind, that we're all connected. It's a powerful message.
But can't forget the Antichrist. What happens to the universe with someone like that running around?
Now, his legacy, that's the most interesting one, maybe. He's choice, embodied, born into a role, destined for one thing, but he struggles with it.
Throws a wrench in the whole chess game idea. Like even with these huge forces moving around, he's saying, nah, I get a say too.
And we all feel that. We're not just our parents, our past mistakes. The Antichrist, he reminds us we can choose who we become.
Powerful stuff. So we've gone from Lucifer to God, cosmic level, down to, well, us. What do we take away from all this?
That's the thing, isn't it? There's no easy answer, no cosmic instruction manual, but in exploring these figures, their struggles, it opens us up.
So not about the answers, but learning to ask better questions.
Exactly. We went from the biggest scales down to the human heart, and you know what? they're not that different. We're all in this universe trying to figure it out, to find meaning in the chaos.
And maybe, just maybe, that's the point.
Maybe that's everything.
For everyone listening, thanks for coming on this journey with us. Keep wondering, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.